Dr. Ambedkar did not promote Buddhism through the Constitution. However, central to the preamble were the principles of liberty, equality and fraternity, which he famously said he derived not from the French Revolution, but from the teachings of my master, the Buddha. Equally emphatic were his concluding words to the Buddha and Karl Marx. It seems that the three, liberty, equality and fraternity, can only exist if one follows the way of the Buddha. So although he did not specifically mention Buddhism in connection with the principles, with these three principles, in the preamble to the Constitution, I believe we would be doing him a misservice, an injustice, not to assume that for him they are imbued with the meaning he derived from the Buddha. So the implementation of these principles dominated his intellectual and political life. In Ranade Gandhi and Jina, he said, rights are protected. Forgive me, I'm going to give quite a few quotes. I mean, I love them, and although you are familiar with them all, I'm sure. Rights are protected not by law, but by social and moral conscience of the society. We must make our political democracy a social democracy as well. A way of life which recognises liberty, equality, fraternity as the principles of life. In Annihilation of Caste, he explained that these three principles, or democracy, entailed a complete change in the fundamental notions of life, a complete change in the values of life, a complete change in outlook and attitude towards men and things. It means a new life. So this is the sort of what he was looking for as substance to these principles of liberty, equality, fraternity. Now, to cut a long story short, this thinking eventually led him to Buddhism. In his paper on the Buddha and the Future of Religion in 1950, he talked of the need for an ethical foundation for governance. He said, in all societies, law plays a very small part. It is intended to keep the minority within the range of social discipline. The majority has to be left to sustain its social life by the postulates and sanction of morality. Religion, in the sense of morality, must therefore remain the governing principle in every society. This in 1950. Now, morality differs from religion to religion, as we know. Ram, Dr. Ambedkar said, was only following his moral duty, the religious morality, and he had three criteria. The first was that it should be in accordance with science, it should not contradict science. The second was it must recognise the fundamental tenets of liberty, equality, fraternity, and third, it must not sanctify poverty. And he said the only religion that he knows that satisfies these criteria was Buddhism. So an understanding of how Dr. Ambedkar understood the principles of liberty, equality and fraternity to be Buddhist values is essential if we're to explore the question of Buddhism and its impact on the Constitution through Ambedkar. Now this really needs a whole seminar to itself, or at least an hour's paper. I'm going to just touch on a few things in 20 minutes and point to a few references of Dr. Ambedkar's. So first of all, liberty. In several places, Dr. Ambedkar contrasts the Buddha with the founders of other religions. The founders of other religions, claimed to be the Son of God, the God of gods, the last prophet of God, and this meant that they or their representatives could not be questioned. To do so was the quickest way to hell. And such beliefs lead to fear. They've justified authoritarian regimes throughout history. To question the religion, to question the ruler was to question God. It happens today. Now, I don't want to give you any examples for obvious reasons. But the Buddha never claimed omnipotence. He never claimed infallibility. There was never any need for intermediaries between him and the people for this reason. And he insisted that his religion was, quote, based on reason and experience, and his followers should not accept it as correct and binding merely because it emanated from him. He said no other religious founder has had that sort of openness of spirit. And this spirit permeates all areas of life for a Buddhist. And so Dr. Ambedkar could say in the same article, the Buddha taught as part of his religion social freedom, intellectual freedom, economic freedom, and political freedom. Now, he spoke passionately on freedom well before he converted to Buddhism, in Which Way Freedom, which I believe is a sort of counterpart to annihilation of caste. Annihilation of caste is quoted often. That was what he said to the country, the Hindus. And Which Way Freedom was what he said to his own community. And I believe you can't really have one without the other. You have to look at them both together. So he spoke very passionately, as I said, in this about freedom. Again, forgive me for quoting at length. Mere physical, it's a beautiful passage. Mere physical freedom is of no use. The principle is he should be free to act according to his free will, and he should be able to make the maximum use of the abilities he possesses. What is the use of such freedom of a man whose mind is not free? A person whose mind is not free, though he is not in chains, is a slave. Though he is alive, is dead. Freedom of mind is the proof of one's existence. I call him free who with consciousness awake realizes his rights, responsibilities and duties. He who is not a slave of circumstances and is always bent on changing them in his favour. Who is not a slave of usage, customs and traditions, or the teachings because they're brought down from the ancestors. One whose flame of reason is not extinguished. He who has not surrendered himself, who does not act on the teachings of others blindly, who does not keep faith on anything unless it's been examined critically in the light of the cause and effect theory, who is always prepared to protect his rights, who is not afraid of public criticism. I call such a man free. In short, a man who is the master of his own life. Now, although this was spoken, written 20 years before his conversion, it has echoes of the well-known Kalama Sutta, which is sometimes said to be the Buddhist manifesto of rationality. He would have been very familiar with this because by then he was quite familiar with basic Buddhist teachings. And in this the Buddha, and actually Dr. Ambedkar incorporated this sutta in the Buddha and his Dhamma later on. The Buddha says, "Come, Kalamas, do not go upon what has been acquired by repeated hearing, nor upon tradition, nor upon rumour, nor upon what is in a scripture, nor upon surmise, nor upon an axiom, nor upon specious reasoning, nor upon bias towards a notion that has been pondered over, nor upon another's seeming ability, nor upon the consideration the monk is our teacher." Now there's a great deal more I could say about freedom, but this is perhaps enough just to indicate how Dr. Ambedkar found the substance of liberty or freedom in the Buddha's teachings. But perhaps I should say that all the Buddha's teachings are taking you to the state of freedom of mind, which in Buddhism is known as vimukti or vimukti, and is understood to be both freedom of the heart, freedom from how can you say, regressive emotions or emotions that sort of cloud the mind and so on, and freedom from confused views or confused thinking. So this is what freedom of mind is in Buddhism. It's almost synonymous with enlightenment itself. So then secondly, equality. Now, Dr. Ambedkar spoke a number of times about equality and Buddhism. I shall restrict myself to just one point. To me, the central chapter in the Buddha and his Dhamma is the one on Saddhamma. What is Saddhamma? And here he talks of two functions of Saddhamma. Firstly, to purify the mind, and secondly, to create a kingdom of righteousness or righteous society, a better society. And these two have to go together. You can't have one without the other. you can't just have purification of mind without it impacting society. You can't have a better society without the purification of those involved in that society, or bringing about that society. So he said, he talked of the basic practices, Buddhist practices of prajna, of shila, of karuna, of maitri. And he said it's not just enough to practice them. They have to be expressed in the way we live our lives, in our attitudes and our behaviour to others. He said, otherwise, that's not practice, that's not Dhamma. Yeah? That's not prajna, shila, karuna or maitri. But it's the last section of this chapter which is most interesting. So if you may not agree with me that this is a central chapter of the Buddha and his Dhamma, but if you accept that this chapter on Saddhamma is a central chapter, the last section on this is called Dhamma to be Saddhamma must pull down all social barriers. Now, I don't know that other teachers write like this, other Buddhist teachers. So, in this he makes it clear how he expects Dhamma practice to be expressed. The first two parts of this are concerned with, firstly, relating to people in hierarchical terms. And secondly, in terms of their birth rather than worth. In other words, the group they come from. And these principles can clearly be extended beyond caste into all areas of social existence. All too easily we relate to others in terms of sort of, are they above us or below us? Even if you don't come from a caste society like me from the West, you still do that. Maybe it's our class conditioning, maybe it's something natural to human or intrinsic to human nature. And we tend to relate to people according to the group they come from. You know, whether they're men or women, what is their caste, what is their class, what is their education, what is their position, their region, their colour, and so on. So in other words, what he's saying is, we don't relate, or we avoid relating to people just as other human beings. Yeah? We're always trying to avoid that in some way. They're lower, so we relate in a certain way. They're higher. They're this group. So instead of seeing them as a particular person, relating to them as a human being, we sort of put them in these group terms and dismiss them or accept them on that basis. So in this way, we don't relate to people with, to quote, respect and reverence. Now the third and last section of this chapter is called Dhamma to be Saddhamma must promote. The third section of this chapter, Dhamma to be Saddhamma must promote equality between man and man. Now, man and man is sort of not really correct these days. I'm just using his language. It speaks for itself. So the real test for Dhamma practice, according to Dr. Ambedkar, is whether or not it helps us, it makes us more effective in promoting equality. I don't think I need to say any more than that on equality. Then lastly, fraternity. And Dr. Shirsagar spoke at length and very clearly and very appropriately on this yesterday, so I will just confine myself to being very brief. Some of these points were covered yesterday anyway. In the Riddles of Hinduism, on the section, I think, on Brahma, Dr. Ambedkar writes, what sustains equality and liberty is fellow feeling, what the French Revolution called fraternity. The word fraternity is not an adequate expression. The proper term is what the Buddha called maitri. And that came up yesterday in the questions. Fraternity is the root, maitri fraternity is the root of democracy. Then he says in the Buddha and his Dhamma something sort of equally interesting. He said there can be liberty for some, but not for all. There can be equality for a few, but not for the majority. The only remedy lies in making fraternity universally effective. Fraternity is nothing but another name for brotherhood of man, which is another name for morality. This is from the Buddha and his Dhamma, his compilation of the Buddha's teachings. So it's not something else. It's connected intrinsically with his approach to Buddhism. Now, seems to be a contradiction here. In one passage he equates fraternity with Maitri, and in the other with morality. But this is more apparent than real. He talks in the Buddha and his Dhamma of morality and Maitri being the same. Yeah? If morality is another name for brotherhood of man, Maitri is the attitude of universal benevolence, which leads to compassion that sustains that feeling. And in Maitri, the special characteristic is that it's infinitely expansive. It excludes none. You exclude one person from Maitri, no Maitri. Yeah, so this is the intrinsic character, or the basic character of Maitri. So the question of morality in Maitri is also made clear in what he says about the first of the 5 Buddhist precepts, which we take after chanting the refuges. Panati pata dharamani sikaprang samadhyami. So he said, this is the most important of the precepts. And people usually take it as mean just not to kill. He said the Buddha took care to make it clear that the precept did not merely mean abstaining from taking life. He insisted that the precept must be understood to mean positive sympathy, goodwill, and love for everything that breathes. Again, in the 22 vows that he gave at the time of his conversion, he includes the 5 precepts, but he doesn't say the first precept in the traditional terms. He says, I think in English translates something, I will extend compassion to all living beings and I will nurture them and nourish them, something like that. Is that right? Thank you. So it was so much more positive than I will just not kill other beings. So this is the essential meaning that Dr. Ambedkar gave to fraternity. Have I got 5 minutes? Thank you. So I hope I've said enough to give an indication of how Dr. Ambedkar saw liberty, equality, fraternity as Buddhist values. As I said above, this really needs a full seminar to itself, and I'd be very happy if we could organise something like this at some point. Dr. Ambedkar also brought in the influence of Buddhism more directly in placing the Ashoka chakra on the national flag and making the Ashoka lion pillar as a symbol of the government of India. Both specifically Buddhist symbols. I should be very brief here. Actually, I haven't been able to find anything substantial about anything said by Dr. Ambedkar on these. Maybe you can help me. Please tell me afterwards if you can. But the Ashoka chakra is a symbol for what Dr. Aloni said at the beginning, Pratitya Samutpada, or the principle of conditionality or conditioned co-production. And this is the central natural law that the Buddha discovered. So when I say natural law and discovered, it wasn't a particular teaching that he imposed on people, on his followers. It's something that he discovered, a truth that he discovered. And it's this truth that essentially we mean when we say Dhammang Saranang Gacchami as Buddhists. And people often are not very clear about what we mean when we say Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. Buddhang Saranang Gacchami is very clear, but Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, does it just mean the teachings? Which teachings do I follow? Actually, it means this truth, which is essentially the truth of conditioned co-production, of conditionality, of Pratitya Samutpada. So there's also the link with King Ashoka, and it was this link that seemed to have persuaded Gandhi to accept the Ashoka chakra on the flag. And this link is also the case with the second symbol, the Ashoka lion pillar. Ashoka tried to rule guided by the Dhamma, and he encouraged his subjects to live according to the Buddhist basic ethical teachings. He didn't say be Buddhist to them, but he said just don't harm others, etc., etc., etc. Very much, I think, Dr. Ambedkar's approach. So Ashoka erected the Lion Pillar at Sarnath to mark the point where the Buddha gave his first teachings after enlightenment. Because he was the ruler, he was the king, H.G. Wells calls him the greatest king in history, it has become a symbol for the Dhammaraja, governance permeated by the principles of the Dhamma. It also stands for all that's best in Indian history. Dr. Ambedkar writes of the Mauryan Empire in Annihilation of Caste, which reached its zenith under Ashoka. There is only one period in Indian history which is a period of freedom, greatness and glory. That is the period of the Mauryan Empire. At all other times the country suffered from defeat and darkness. But the Maurya period was a period when the Chatuvarna was completely annihilated, when Shudras, who constituted the mass of the people, came into their own and became the rulers of the country. Many of my friends and many people I meet are pessimistic about the state of the country today, India. I understand and I sympathise, but I don't share that pessimism. I've been here for over 40 years now, and when I came here, the Ambedkarite movement was limited by and large to a particular community in Maharashtra, pockets in the main cities throughout India. Now it's absolutely everywhere. You know, scheduled castes all over India, even scheduled tribes, even OBCs. We have, I'm involved in running a college in Nagpur for Buddhist training. In the last number of years we've had students from 26 different states, so that speaks for itself. All interested in Baba Sahib, all interested in the Dhamma. I believe this movement is unstoppable. Obviously the direction it takes is up to us. You couldn't have a seminar like this 20, 30, 40 years ago. You just couldn't have done that. You didn't have the confidence then that you, the incredible confidence that you've got now. So if this sort of rate of growth has been going sort of like this, and if it continues, I wouldn't be surprised if in 50 to 100 years you have well over 30 crores Buddhists in this country. Already they're having an impact on Indian society. People have to respect Buddhism in a way they didn't 30, 40 years ago. And Dr. Ambedkar is on the stage, his photo has to be on every political platform. So this is appropriation, but it's also recognition. So if this rate of growth goes on, think of the impact it could have on Indian society in 50 years' time. Dr. Ambedkar said, I can't remember the word, history bears out the proposition that political revolutions have always been preceded by social and religious revolutions. Whatever the limitations of the present Buddhist movement, I believe that the more it grows, the stronger the Indian constitution will become and the harder it will be to undermine it. And this is especially because of the influence of Buddhism on Dr. Ambedkar, which he brought to bear on the Constitution.